Today we're going to be doing a custom mod and refurbish on a Nintendo Wii controller. To begin, let's remove the 4 tri-wing screws from the back of the controller that are hidden by the battery and the battery door. When we go to separate the 2 heads of the controller, you'll notice that there's 2 clips located up near the power button holding the shell together. Therefore, you may need a small pry tool to get in between the 2 heads of the shell and help release the clips near the top. You don't want to put too much force on the shell, but you do want to make sure that you hold it apart. If one side is giving you too much trouble, then you may want to switch over to the other, and eventually one side will give up, allowing the controller to open. Don't force anything or you'll force the plastic to break. Now that we've got the controller open, let's set the front half aside and get the motherboard out of the shell. If you'll notice, there's 2 clips near the top holding the top of the motherboard in place. Simply pull those to the side and the motherboard should slip up and out. However, don't rip it right away, as there's 2 wires connecting the rumble motor to the PCB. You'll be able to hinge this plastic piece upwards, and from there you can remove the rumble motor and unclip it from the plastic, allowing you to free the PCB. Let's go ahead and set the plastic shell to the side for now. Let's go ahead and examine the motherboard. You may notice that there's some corrosion on the motherboard by the battery terminal, as well as right near the middle and covering one entire test point. To go ahead and resolve this, we're going to use some vinegar and a soft bristled brush to go ahead and neutralize the corrosion. Simply dip a soft bristled brush in some vinegar and rub it across your PCB where you have any corrosion. Now that we've neutralized the corrosion with some vinegar, let's go ahead and clean up the whole board with some isopropyl alcohol. You can go ahead and use this to clean up pretty much everything on the board. Now you'll notice we did clean up most of the corrosion, however one of the test points is still entirely covered, as well as a few of the vias do look like they still have some corrosion. As this is a personal controller, I'm not too worried about it, so I'm going to ignore them. And I also know for a fact that the way Nintendo designs their boards, if one test point is destroyed, typically the circuit is still complete, so I don't have much to worry about. Just to reiterate, since this is a personal controller, I'm going to continue on with this project. Now that we've got the motherboard all cleaned up, let's go ahead and swap out the blue LEDs for some custom purple ones while we're at it. All we have to do is put some flux over the LED and use a hot iron and some solder to go ahead and lift away the original LED. I'll then go ahead and use a bit of solder wick and wick away all the flux and solder from the pad. From there, I'll go ahead and reinstall the new LED, and I'll repeat this process for the 3 other LEDs on the board. Now that we've prepared our motherboard, let's go ahead and take a look at our plastic shell and all the components of it. If you really want to, you could meticulously sit here with a Q-tip and clean the entire shell. This is a rather laborious process and will take a while. Instead, we're going to go ahead and put all of the components of our shell into a sonic cleaner for 5 minutes, and that should get rid of most of the gunk.
5 minutes later.
After just 5 minutes in a sonic cleaner, the entire shell looks so much better. While the sonic cleaner can't get rid of scratches or dyed plastic, it can get rid of all the other gunk that's been built up for the last 10 years. From this point, let's go ahead and begin to reassemble the controller. we can go ahead and grab all of the faceplate buttons and begin to drop them in place and put their membranes on top. As you can see, the original D-pad for this controller is pretty beat up and it's actually got Mars from being pressed so hard at one point. So, to go ahead and relieve that, we're going to try and put in a GameBoy Color D-Pad button. From experience, they do fit and they work just as fine, but the button does sit a little bit higher than the OEM button, just because the Game Boy Color button is a little bit taller. From here, we just go ahead and put the button in the shell as normal, and put the membrane over top. We'll just want to make sure that the membrane is pressed down firmly over the button so it all seats down well. Let's start with the B button on the back side. This simply sits down into the shell and lines up with one peg at the very top. From here, let's go ahead and grab the B button membrane housing. We'll want to slide the membrane into the housing. From there, it just slides down into the shell in place. However, we may want to pull it back out because we're going to want to affix the rumble motor and the PCB to the B button membrane housing. The IR shield just slides down into place. The rumble motor sits in the B button membrane housing. The wires will be fed to the left and outside of the plastic housing. You'll want them to clip right under the plastic tab, sitting right next to the rumble mount position. Once you've got the membrane in the B button housing, then you can go ahead and clip the entire housing to the PCB. Finally, because I did solder on this board and introduce some flux, I'm just going to do one final clean with some isopropyl alcohol over the entire thing. From this point, we can go ahead and take our PCB and place it back into the bottom half of the shell. From there, we can take our two halves and snap them together, completing our controller. Finally, reinsert the 4 tri-wing screws before reinserting your batteries and putting on the new battery cover. From here, you've got an entirely refurbished and customized Wii controller with a Game Boy Color D-Pad button. As we can see, everything still works when we put it back together. If you want to customize your Wii remote, it is a relatively easy process. As you can see, we've got a custom Game Boy Color D-Pad button, as well as an entirely clean shell. We've also got an aftermarket battery cover on the back to replace the old school aftermarket one. Once again, the Sonic Cleaner can't clean tinted plastic, but it did remove all the dirt and grime on a controller. So that is a finished Wii remote refurb. If you have any questions or need any help, feel free to leave a comment down below, join our Discord link down below, or email our support at support@handheldlegend.com. As always, thank you for watching.